the recording. Great. So we are now recording, and hopefully, again, we're all in the right place. We got a lot of people here. As a reminder, send me your questions in the chat. But we are here to talk about the 2021 Public Library Annual Report. So I will be covering a lot of basics today, just in terms of where to find the form and how to move around it. I'm also going to go specifically through the form and look at some questions that people tend to ask me about and talk you through some of those, give you some ideas. And I hope to leave you with some important takeaways at the very end. Now, I do want to say, I started doing these sessions a year ago with the 2020 Public Library Annual Report. So if you went to one of those sessions, and if you have been attending the webinars recently about changes to the 2021 Annual Report questions, I am probably not going to say anything new for you, right? I'm generally at this point covering stuff that I have said before, either in June or a year ago in terms of using the annual report. So I will not be offended if you want to drop out and use the next hour to go do something else. But I am following almost exactly the same script as I did in this webinar 1 year ago. So there we are. You are duly warned. Now, I always like to start these sessions with a reminder of the differences between the state report and your library's reports. And if I'm starting to sound like a broken record, I love that, right? Because people all across the state are still getting confused about what the state report is, what you're doing on your own reports. So I still need to keep clarifying that the state report data that we're talking about today, that I collect for the next 4 months, is data that I send to IMLS for the Nationwide Public Library Survey. It's a shared set of questions that every public library in every state across the country and in multiple territories are answering. So it's as much as we can, apples to apples. And because it's nationwide and because we're all doing it, it takes a long time to change those questions. Recently we've had a lot of program changes, but in general, there's a 2 to 3 year process of changing questions. And then 2 to 3 years afterward, after the questions are rolled out, to start getting solid, reliable data. So it takes a while, right? And it's not necessarily as fluid or responsive as your own reports and your own statistics. Now, we will be seeing today that each state can add their own questions to the annual report. Everybody does, Connecticut does. We have sort of the middle number of questions that most states ask. There are some states that ask a lot more questions than we do, and some states that ask fewer. But many of our questions come from requests from library directors or staff or people who are looking for the information. So that's why we ask them in our annual report. And we'll see there are a lot of questions that I gather from you, and I crunch the data into a larger question for IMLS. So I call them feeder questions. We'll see those as well as we go along today. But all of that data is completely separate from your library's reports and the data that you are collecting at your space to tell your story to your funders and stakeholders and boards and towns and patrons. And I do encourage you to keep more data than you need just for the state public libraries report. There's so much more just in terms of reference statistics and so many more pieces of data that you could keep to really talk about your impact in your community. And I hope that you're doing that. But all of those numbers and those stories are under your control. So please be doing that. And people often say, well, we count this, we count this, we count this. Where do I put that in the state report? And I say, you don't. But that's fabulous for you guys, right? Keep tracking those numbers, keep using them to tell your own story. It's really important for you. So please do that. All right, so that's my soapbox on the difference between state report and your library's reports. I do want to say at this point, the annual report that we're talking about right now always covers the same 12-month time period from July 1 to June 30. It's that same 12-month period every single year. And it is due, the report form is due to me on November 15th. That is the same every year, unless the 15th falls on a weekend day, as it did last year, and you get a little extra time, which is always nice. But it's reliably due to me on November 15th, and that is a date in the statutes. So just keep tracking your numbers throughout the year. You can do programs and circ every single month. You can be getting those totals every single month and putting your reports together. And there are some things that you'll count at the end of a year, like your collections at the end of the year, your holdings, that kind of thing. So you can gather some of this data throughout the year and be ready for your annual report. I do want to mention, if you're not tracking your stats according to the annual report categories, you might want to consider it just to make your life a little easier when this report comes around. It's up to you, but that is an option to you just to make life easier. And I do want to encourage you to strive for consistent counting methods from year to year. In the annual report form, there's a column where you can leave notes to yourself. And of course, you can leave notes to yourself anywhere else, right? Like in a Word document or a 3-ring binder or sticky notes or something. But try to keep track of how you came up with your numbers this year so that you can use that same methodology next year and the following year and the following year, right? So if it's consistent numbers, you'll be able to actually see trends over time. In contrast to using different methods every single year, your numbers are going to jump around and it's not really going to tell you anything because you don't have that consistent methodology. So strive for that as much as you can. Okay, we're going to pop out of this here and we're going to head over to our LibGuides. So hopefully you can see this URL right here. This is where you will be able to find the annual report and all of the information that's relevant to it. I think that at 4 o'clock today, you'll probably get an automated email from me that includes this URL as well as an encouragement to fill out the survey, the evaluation form afterward. So that's the link, the annual report form. And here's what the page looks like. And as we scroll down, this tab right here, 2021 Annual Report, is where you will find the form. There is a lot of additional information here in these separate tabs. So right here, changes to the 2021 report. This is a long list of all of the new questions, the changed questions, clarifications, a ton of info here under changes to the report and all of these recordings, right? I've been talking about these changes for a while. Here's some slides if you'd like to go with those. Programs are a significantly different thing in the annual report this year. And I've been trying to get that message out for the past 7 or 8 months at this point. If you have questions about programs, start here on the Programs tab. There's a lot of information, videos for how to use this tracking spreadsheet. And then as we scroll down, lots of recordings for what are programs and what are activities and what do we count and how do we count it? What are some examples? All of the information right here under programs, state aid and previous year's reports are here if you need them. But let's backtrack to this tab, 2021 Annual Report. And as we scroll down, again, lots of reminders, lots of information here. When the recording is done, I'm going to put it right here. So this register link will turn into a recording link and you'll be able to find it right here. If you wanted to watch this again, for some reason, I apologize that you have to sit through it again. But here's a little video about how to use the form. A lot of it we'll cover today. And here is the actual Excel form itself. So let's click on that and download it and open it. And once you've got it open, you will almost immediately want to save it to make sure that anything you enter in here will be maintained somewhere on your computer, right? Don't do anything until you have saved this to your computer. I'm not going to do that right now because it takes too much time. But this is when it opens up, it comes to the Instructions and Definitions tab right here. And as it says here, this is going to print in 8 pages. Oof. So you can print it if you want to and read through it. That's an option for you. But it starts right up here with what's new, okay? So I encourage you to read through what's new. A lot of this, as I mentioned, I have covered in past webinars and lots of email announcements. So that's under what's new. Here's some great things that you could read before you start on your annual report. Just reminders of your deadline, all of these extra little things that we're going to cover as we go along. A reminder here about what dates are included here. All my contact info is right here. Email is usually going to be the best way to get me right now. We're still telecommuting and teleworking a few days a week. But then as we scroll down, there are copious definitions here, many, many definitions, probably more than you want to read, but it's there as a resource if you need it. And I know that it's hard to find things. So my favorite trick with any electronic document, you're a librarian, so you're probably familiar with this too, Control F to find something. So if you say, oh my gosh, where is that thing that Maria mentioned? Where do I put my ARPA income this year? Let's do a little keyword search, Control F for ARPA. And here's my definition that tells me where to put my ARPA money in my annual report. Ching, 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 we're gonna cover that later. So that's how you, is an easy way to navigate through the instructions and definitions. Super handy, useful in any kind of electronic document. Okay, we're gonna hop over to the survey. Here's the actual form. We'll start by reviewing some of the columns. There is a new feature. So this very first column, way over on the left, is something I added to draw your attention to which questions are federal questions that we send to IMLS, and those are marked with the abbreviation US. That seemed the shortest way in 2 letters to indicate that that was a national question that we send to IMLS. So everybody in the US is answering those questions. Then logically, CT is Connecticut specific questions. That one seemed like a no-brainer, right? That seems pretty easy. And then these Fs right here, those are feeder questions that feed into national questions for the public library survey. And as we scroll down, we'll see a lot more of those in circulation programs, income, expenses, a lot of those feeder questions. I try to get a little more granular detail from you guys so I can feed it back to you in these great reports. But really, it's the totals that I need to send to IMLS. So that's why we ask a few extra feeder questions for them. I also want to remind you about some recently added features. The reminder column right here, whoops, answer needed. So this is just to the right of the answer column, right? So answers come here, and then if you need to fill in something, it's going to tell you here the answer is needed. So make sure that you are taking a look at those before you submit, because all of those need to be answered. And then you can see 2 years worth of history here. So you've got last year's answers and you've got the answers from 2 years ago. So that helps to provide you a little more context, and you'll be able to see if your numbers are wonky. Obviously, they were a little wonky last year because of COVID. So just take them as a guideline, a little grain of salt with those numbers. And then, as I mentioned, as we scroll over to the right just a little further, there is your notes column here. And I do encourage you to use this column, fill in those little notes for yourself, right? As a reminder, ask so-and-so for this number, or this comes from this account in our financial system, or I included these different databases in this count. So take those little notes for yourself. If you want, you can send me a version of your annual report with those notes deleted. That's totally up to you. But I love it when I see those notes, because it says to me that you are really being more cognizant of consistency and accuracy from year to year. And I love seeing those. I read anything into them. I just enjoy seeing them. It's very fun. So we're going to scroll up to the top here. And we're gonna pull down. You always have to start by, see right here in red letters, first, click on the cell below and choose your library. and then don't change it once you've picked it, because you're going to get yourself confused. So we're going to try to scroll down. The scrolling is so tricky on here. We're going to try to pick Hartford. Because they're so much more interesting with all of their branches and bookmobile. Thank goodness. Whew. All right. And I'm going to try to, see now down here on the very bottom right, this is a tip. It's actually smaller than it should be right now. I'm showing this form to you at 90%, and I want to make it a little bit bigger. So the font is bigger on your screen. So I just bumped that up to 100%. So it's a little easier to see. Make sure you're doing that, bigger or smaller, whichever you prefer, just to make your life easier as you're viewing the form on your end. But now we can see it a little better. But you see how all the data suddenly filled in, right? So all of these things are pre-filled from last year. Basic contact info doesn't usually change, but you can see the last 2 years worth of data are here. And right here, answer needed. This is the very first question that we need to fill in. So you'll go ahead and type in the email address there of your director. And once I type it in, that answer needed goes away. Nice handy thing. Okie dokie. What else do I want to tell you over here? Oh, lots of pop-up boxes. Yeah, so anytime you see this tiny little red triangle in the upper right corner of a question box, that indicates that there's a pop-up comment or a pop-up definition that will provide you with more information about that specific question. So all you have to do is kind of hover over that question. And if there's a pop-up, it'll automatically show up for you and give you a little bit more info. So take advantage of those wherever you see them. Most of that information is also included on the instructions and definitions page, so you can go back there and find it too. There's some correlation between those two sources. Okay, drop-down boxes are a big feature of this form as well. So we see here in question 1.15, if I click in there, it wants me to choose from the drop-down list. I have to pick one of these choices. I guess I could pick nothing, but I have to pick one of these choices in order to make answer needed go away. If I try to type something in there that's not one of the choices, it's going to give me an error message. So that's what you'll see if you're not picking something from the drop-down menu. Very handy. That's getting us to a controlled vocabulary that we're familiar with. It helps me compress the data so it's a little bit more manageable and consistent again, and helps me create some more charts for people. So that's why we're using that consistent drop-down menu. Okay, as we scroll down, there are some of these nifty little arrows to get you down to the next section if you really want to hop ahead, or you can use them to get up to the previous section. So just a faster way of moving around. And I do want to show you what the sums look like. So these boxes right here that are shaded in blue are automatic sums. So these will populate automatically based on a formula and based on the numbers that you have typed into the cells above. So there's a formula there that will automatically calculate. All right, I want to get rid of, I think I want to see if I can get rid of this ribbon up at the top. There we go, and give us a little more room. That's always nice too, isn't it? All right, so let's take a look at some specific questions. And I want to mention that the chat has been very quiet. So please go ahead and drop your questions in there as we go along. I will watch it. Otherwise, I'm going to assume that you're all still there and you're all still listening and we're still good. So let's start specific questions with 1.12, which is about the square feet of your main library. And again, here, take a look at the pop-up definition and what that might mean in the context of your space, because this is the area on all floors that's enclosed by the outer walls of your library building, and include everything that's in that space, even if it's off limits to the public. And you might think, well, what difference does it make? If your library applies for E-rate funding, the square footage is an important factor in some of that funding calculation. So it can get you a lot of money in the long run. And it's kind of surprising how square footage can change as people remeasure their buildings. You may have had the exact same building and never have done any additions or renovations, but you take a look at the plans and remeasure and you think, now we're including the cellar in the way that we hadn't before, and we have a lot more square feet. So please do take a look at that particular question and update it if you need to. So let's scroll down a little farther, 1.30 and 1.31. These are questions about curbside pickup during the period July 1, 2020 through June 30, 2021. Odds are really good that your library was offering curbside pickup during that time. Go ahead and enter the start and end dates. And this is an open-ended field, right? So if you started, I don't know, 15 months ago, go ahead and put the start date. And if you're still doing it, just say ongoing or still happening, or whatever terminology makes sense to you to indicate that this is still something that your library is offering. I think a lot of libraries may be transitioning this into a long-term service. Now, if your library offered curbside pickup, was it available to residents only or to both residents and non-residents? This is a little drop down right here. Make sure you pick one of those, or NA if that's the best choice for you. So those are there. And I want to also point out this new question, 1.33. This is a question that I've stolen from several other states, and it asks you to tell us something your library did in this reporting period that you're proud of. It's open-ended, right? You can type a book in there if you want to, or you can just send me an email with your book. That would be okay too, and your photographs. But we're looking for some good news from you, something that you're proud of that your library did. This may show up, I don't know, in reports to funders. This may show up in reports to the governor. I don't know yet how we're going to use it, but we would love to hear some great stories from you and your libraries about what you're doing for your communities. Send me an anecdote. If you have 2 lines, that's okay too, but write something for professional readers. You know, don't try to avoid the slang that I use when I speak all the time. Try to sound smart when you're doing it. Write professionally for us would be absolutely wonderful. All right, scrolling down to section 2. Whoops. This is a reminder. This is your library services as of these dates, right? So there's that reminder right there at the top of section 2 about what to include in the report for this period. This is going to be a tricky one. 2.1, your annual public service hours for your library. And count only the hours when your library building is open to the public. So during that particular reporting period, your library may have been closed to the public, but staff was working inside. That is great, but you would not report those hours here as public service hours. What you will be counting is the hours when your library building was open to the public. And I've talked about this in numerous webinars, but that means that your doors were open for people to walk in. So if you were doing foyer or vestibule or lobby pickups, people were entering your building and your building was open for public service. So count those hours here. If you were only working in the building as staff and you were only providing curbside help, meaning that people were not entering your building, then you would not count those hours. There's information here, there's information in the pop-up there, just to help you work out those hours and what's what. Likewise, as we scroll down to question 2.2, this is also the number of weeks your library building was open to the public. Same definition, right? Doors are open, members of the public are walking into your building. That's what you'll be counting. Okay, we're going to scroll down to question 2.15. Right here about Wi-Fi sessions. Whoa, look at that great big long pop-up. That's a big one. You may have to expand some of the windows on these. We get a little wordy in here. But this is about the wireless sessions. So the use of your public Wi-Fi signal. It's incredibly important and increasingly important, right? While all of our buildings were closed, many libraries were still offering Wi-Fi outdoors for the public. But you need to be able to count that, right? You got to be able to count that just in the same way you count uses of your public computers. Go ahead and figure out how to count use of your Wi-Fi. There are ways to do that. Talk to your IT people and then start reporting it to me. When we did the stats a year ago, only about a third of public libraries in Connecticut could report that number to me. And that stresses me out because I know this is a huge factor on you being able to show impact in your community. Not just, yeah, we provide it, but yeah, this many people took advantage of it every single month. That's a really compelling statistic. So please, please, please start capturing that number or figuring out how to do that. And then once you report me that number, there is here this new question about how you came up with that number, whether it's an actual count throughout the year or an estimate based on hardware logging or network scanning. So talk to your IT people and figure out what that means in your context and how you figure that out. All right, I do want to point out 2.16 about reference transactions. This is the only question in the entire report about all of the reference work that your library is doing. So bundle it in there. Make sure you're reading the definition. Let's see, this does include in-person reference as well as email, phone, and chat, right? So as you read the definition, you'll see that it is not platform specific. It includes all of those platforms. So however you were conducting your reference work at your library, make sure that you are counting all of those transactions and reporting them here in question 2.16. Oh, I've been neglecting my chat. Let me backtrack over there for question 1.33, how should we send photos? You can send them as an email attachment to me. So when you are submitting your annual report form, you're going to send that to me by email. That will already be an attachment to your email. So just go ahead and add me some photos. That would be fabulous. While you're sending me an email, drop some more stuff on there. Another question in the chat, can I count a program as offsite if I do it at one of our branches? So I encourage you to review all of the guidance about what's onsite and offsite and all of the definitions about onsite and offsite programs. There's been a ton of information put out about programs and what that means onsite and offsite. But I will reiterate that on-site means on your library premises. So if you are offering a program in your library building, in your library parking lot, on your library lawn, on your library roof, on your library back deck or patio or porch, if it is on library premises, it is on site. If it is not on library premises, it is off-site. So that might be the town park, that might be the community center, a school, a beach, a farmer's market. If it's off-site, that would be off-site. So those are the definitions. Please do look at all of the guidance that already exists if you have further program questions. All right, we're going to scroll down a little bit farther. If you have a bookmobile or branches, make sure that you are clicking this link. I'm going to click it and we're going to see what happens when we hop over there. That gets us to a whole new tab over here for branches that starts out with bookmobile questions and scrolls down to branch questions. So be sure that you're answering those. The summary question at the bottom that says you have this many questions left unanswered doesn't count the branches sheet. So if you have branches, make sure that you're answering those questions, or I'm going to have to just send your report back to you and you're going to have to send them to me later. So please remember to put them in as you go along. Okay, lots more program questions. So the number of program questions has increased. As I mentioned, there's a ton of guidance out there, multiple webinar recordings and web pages about this. Lots more detail on different formats, slightly different ages. So right now, for this year, we are lumping ages 0 through 11 all together in one question in this section here. But starting with next year's report, these ages will get broken down differently. So ages 0 to 5 and ages 6 to 11 will have separate sections in next year's annual report. So since it's just July and we're at the very beginning of a new reporting year, I encourage you to keep track of your program stats by those age groups. If you're using the program and activity tracking spreadsheet, you are all set. You are already doing these age groups. So please remember to break them down differently going forward. Okay, attendance. These attendance questions, as we have in the past, you will count attendance based on the age group for which the program is intended, right? So if you're offering a story time for toddlers ages 2 to 3, you're counting all of the 2 to 3-year-olds as well as their adult caregivers or teen caregivers. You're counting them all as attendance at that program for that particular age group. So make sure that you're tracking your attendance the correct way. As we scroll down, you'll see programs for adults and all other programs not counted above. This is the catch-all. So whether you call it family or intergenerational or all ages or other, whatever terminology you use at your library that is the catch-all for other programs, you'll report them here in this other program section. That's where they go. And then as we scroll down, all of these blue totals here will total up automatically for you. And I'll use those to send to IMLS and add them to some great reports. So that's going to be some good numbers. Okie dokie. As we scroll down, the self-directed activities are here at the bottom of the programs area. These are all new this year. These are all Connecticut specific questions. There's a ton of information about this online. And if you hover over self-directed activities here, remember, see how it's got that little red triangle just in the upper right corner? Another pop-up comes onto the screen and gives you a description of what those self-directed activities are. So good information there, just as a reminder. And we'll scroll down to section 3, which is about collections. Same place it has been. There's some information here right at the beginning of the collections section. This information does apply to everything in section 3 about your holdings as of June 30th, 2021. So that's when you're going to try and get your count, get your reports. Hopefully your consortium is helping you with this if you have a consortium. And there's guidance there. Don't count anything that you borrowed from the service center or your swap items. Make sure you're checking those definitions and the instructions. Okay, we're going to scroll down a little farther to question 3.18, which is about your local databases. If we hover over it, look at that pop up. Another great big long comment box with a ton of information there, trying to guide you as to what you would count there. This does include databases like your newspaper access, your consumer reports, and it does include electronic collections like Frigo, Hoopla, IndieFlix, Gale Virtual Reference Library, lump it all in there, right? That counts. It's all right there. So that's just the number of databases and electronic collections that you subscribe to. And that will get added to the state number right here. And then your total will come up right down there. That's how it works. So I do want to point out question 3.20. I'm going to scroll down a little bit here. 3.20 and 3.21. This is really where keeping notes for yourself is so helpful. Keeping track with the successful retrieval number in terms of different databases and how you found that number for that specific database. There are just so many different databases and they change all the time and they're changing these numbers all the time that there's no way that I can come up with any specific written guidance that will cover all of them. So this is why it's really helpful for you to keep track of it from year to year and figure out where those numbers came from so you can recreate it in future years. But count whatever items you think fit the definition of the number of full content units or descriptive records that are examined, downloaded, or otherwise supplied to the user. So this is your judgment. I can't check you on it. I can't quiz you on it, but take a look at this pop-up box definition and use your own best judgment to figure out what fits into that definition. Go ahead and send me your best numbers for that. And again, consistent from year to year would be best. Okay, scrolling down to circulation. So again, this is our period that we're covering. Here are some instructions here that cover the entire section 4 about circulation, reminding you how to handle renewals. Yes, count your renewals. All these fabulous instructions are right there. Now, this question 4.0 I added because many different directors asked me if I had this information, and I didn't have it. So it seemed like a compelling enough reason to add a question to the annual report. This is just a yes, no, just a yes, no question. And this, for libraries that don't do it, this is usually an automated setting in your ILS that will automatically renew items a couple of days before they're due for your patrons. Usually happens without patron intervention. So again, with this circulation section, I'm hoping this is something your consortium can help you with, in addition to the collections and holding section. This is what you pay them money for, right? To renew reports on your ILS. So as we scroll down to the electronic items down here at the bottom, so ebooks. Ebooks were tricky this year. RB Digital, right? So RB Digital went away, and we managed to grab the stats. So the number of circs by your patrons of RB Digital materials owned by the state. So available through Research It. So that's this number. But then things get complicated. So for your own holdings, go ahead and enter them here in the ebooks and the downloadable audio. Hopefully you can capture stats for your own materials. And then people always ask me about songs. Where do we put streamed songs and downloaded songs? Those go into 4.34 other. So that's downloadable audio where age level is not known. That's where you put your downloaded and streamed songs. But as we scroll down to 40.40A, this is a new question, new in 2021. This is all of these Simply E checkouts of state library owned titles for all ages. So this is a huge catch-all. So if your library participates in Simply E and you are providing access for your patrons to all of the materials in Simply E, you also have access to a dashboard of statistics. And there is information, and in fact, there's a little link. If you see in the pop-up box, the very last line, the last 2 lines of the text in the pop-up box, that's the link for where to find your library statistics, to get the instructions to do that. With the transition, this is not data that I can get for you, unfortunately. I wish I could. Life would be so much easier if I could just get this for the however many libraries are participating in Simply E, but I can't. I think it's 115 libraries right now. So please go ahead and grab that information as much as you can for your own patrons and the items that they borrowed through Simply E. Brad, I'm going to throw you on Brad. If you have questions about how to do that, Brad Bullis is the person to talk to, and he's fabulous and he will walk you through it. But if you email me, I'm just going to refer you to Brad for all of those questions. This is why I love my coworkers. They take care of these things. So as I scroll down a little farther, these ILL questions are the same as last year, as in all previous years. Let's just take a look at the definition. Here's the clarification here about what's an interlibrary loan. So make sure that you are following this consistently from year to year, please. Okay, we're going to hop way down now to section 5, the staff questions. These are all wonderfully helpful questions, and you'll see a lot of these are Connecticut specific. and a lot of them feed into national questions. But this is really amazing data, and I hope that you will continue to provide all of these numbers, because this is part of the data that gets used a lot. People are always looking at salaries and hours and benefits to make sure that they are competitive in their hiring practices. And as they're looking for jobs, looking to see what kind of salaries they might be able to expect at certain libraries or in certain areas. So these questions in section 5 are really data rich and very helpful for all of our peers. So I hope you'll fill those out with as much accuracy as possible. And as we scroll down a little bit to these current salary ranges, current means current as of like the day you fill this out. So current as of fiscal year 2022. So we're in fiscal year 22 right now. So you'll be using those numbers as you report the hourly or salary ranges. And if you can, please give me the hourly rate here. That's really what's most translatable for people. And I'm probably going to try and break them down to hourly rates anyway, because if somebody gives me a salary range for 35 hours versus a salary range for 40 hours, those can actually be quite different, but actually have the same hourly rate. So give me the hourly rate if you've got it. And I often get this question about, say, like 5.13, the children's librarian, or 5.14, the reference and adult services librarian. People will say, well, should I put the department head there, or should I put someone who is a children's librarian? And I usually say, I don't know, what did you put last year? So this is where you leave notes for yourself and try to figure out what you did last year. And sometimes you can tell based on last year's numbers, but strive for consistency. If you are lucky enough to have more than one children's librarian, maybe you want to pick one of them. Maybe you don't want to pick the department head. If you've got a ton of reference librarians, go ahead and maybe pick a standard salary for that particular department. But that, what you enter there is really up to you. Just again, look for consistency from year to year. A question in the chat. For question 5.1, we normally have many volunteers, but none for this fiscal year. I hear you, right? Right. Normally you get to put like a honking lot of hours in here for a typical week. And you know what? Nobody's going to have volunteer hours this year. You know, we're all in the same boat, honestly. The people contacted me last year as well, and they felt horrible about the numbers that they had to put in their annual report. And it's going to happen again this year. You're going to feel bad about the numbers because you know that they're less than last year. You know that they're down. But that's life, right? That's what it is. I do encourage you to be factual and accurate with what you send me, because we need to be able to see the impact of the coronavirus on libraries across the country. We need to be able to tell that story. And in all of my reports, in all of the data that I pass out in subsequent years, there's going to be an asterisk right next to fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 21, because we had a coronavirus those years and it took a long time to recover. And in fact, some libraries are still recovering and still getting back up to their full-time hours. So it is going to be a bit of a shift, but just give me what you got, you know, and over time, we're going to be able to see those numbers coming back up. And I think that's the great story, right? We'll be able to see when we are back to pre-pandemic levels, which is super exciting. So yeah, I know a lot of the numbers are going to be low. I feel you. I hear your pain. Yeah. Yeah. But if there's any consolation, everybody's feeling it. So we're going to scroll down to section 6, these COVID questions, that were here last year. So most of them are sticking around for another year. Most of these are easy yes, no questions. Hopefully pretty simple to go forward. Let's see, there are some optional ones here at the bottom about the number of transactions or appointments that you had for curbside service, or the number of patrons who used the service. How you answer those is totally up to you. I put them in there because I don't know how people are keeping track of these stats, but it gives you the option to put that information in there if you have it and if you're counting things that way. Number of weeks here, 6.9 number of weeks that your main library building was physically closed and the public could not enter. So again, if you had curbside pickup and people were not entering your building, staff were entering, but the public was not entering your building, that means your building is closed to the public. So you would count those weeks as being physically closed and the public could not enter. In contrast, if your library had lobby pickup or vestibule pickup or whatever the foyer pickup, if people were entering your building for any purpose, then your building was open to the public, and you will not say that you were closed during those weeks. Your building was in fact actually open to the public. That's the distinction that IMLS is drawing. This one here, this question from last year, when they talk about limited public occupancy practices, that can mean just about anything. It's not just a head count. It is also, as you'll see in the pop-up there, about limits on appointments versus no appointments. Maybe there might be time limits for visits. There might be closed stacks or closed meeting rooms. All of those count as limited public occupancy. So keep track of those as well. Oh, I'm sorry, I just noticed there was a question in the chat. Can we put volunteer hours if they did work for the library at home? Sorry, let me scroll back up to 5.1 and see what the wording of that question is so I can answer you. If the library uses volunteers, provide the number of volunteer hours put in by all volunteers in a typical week. Yeah, so there's no specification there that your volunteers have to be working physically at the building or in the building. So if they were volunteering for you from home, go ahead and put them in there. And likewise, this might be if you had volunteers who met by Zoom for some reason, you could go ahead and put those hours in there. Isn't that fun? I know some libraries will count friends, right? Your capital F friends of the library, they'll count those as volunteers. So if your friends were meeting virtually by Zoom and volunteering their time, that could potentially count as volunteer hours. So yeah, that's nice. Think outside the box like that. I like that, right? All right, sorry, I'm scrolling very quickly because I want to get down to section 7 and talk about income. Income and expenses. This goes on for a long time, right? Like section 7, section 8, section 9. So you're going to count your income in the year in which you actually received it. So if you received that money within the specific dates of this report, you will include it. And you will also count your expenses in the year in which you actually spent them, right? So the year in which you wrote the check. And in some cases that can be different from the year in which it was allocated or the year in which it was appropriated, but you really want to be looking at the time frame in which you received the money in your bank account, and correspondingly the time frame at which that money left your bank account. So that's what you're tracking in terms of income and expense. Now let's scroll down to this section on other operating income, section 8. There's a lot of federal income flying around this year, and you will see here all other federal sources. Question 8.4. There's a handy little pop-up box there reminding you about PPP loans, Everybody Learns loans, ARPA grants, those kind of things. Double check. It all goes into question 8.4 right here. Likewise, if your library gets E-rate funding through the BEAR reimbursement method, you would count that income here. That is only if your library actually receives money from E-rate. In contrast, if your library receives a discount, you would not enter it here because you didn't actually get any income, right? You just got a discount. There are two different billing methods with regard to E-rate. There's BEAR and there's SPY. So if you have questions about that, let me know. But in most cases, most Connecticut libraries will not be reporting their E-rate money in these questions. Usually you're getting an E-rate discount. All right, we're going to scroll down. Another question I get is about capital F friends, the friends of the library. So there are usually two ways that the friends give money to your library. They might flat out give you money. They might say, we made $10,000 on the book sale. Here's a check for $10,000. Rock on. And you would enter that income right here in 8.12 as a donation from your friends groups. This might also be where you bring specific requests to the friends and they fund it for you and give you the money. So my friends group will usually meet with the director, and the director will say, we'd like to get this, this, and this. It's going to cost this much money. We all say, yes, go for it. The treasurer writes a check to the library for that amount, for that specific purpose. And that money would go right here, 8.12. Those are donations from your friends groups. The other place you would put that, I'm going to scroll down quickly. We're going to hop ahead to 9.17. So these library services or operations that were paid directly by the friends. This might be the other way, right? Where the bill for the database subscription actually goes to the friends and the friends cut a check to the database company. The library doesn't get involved. If that happens in your case, at your library, you would enter that amount of money included in question 9.17. So that's the other place that you could put friends money if that happens at your library. What do I want to talk about? I'm going to scroll back up to section 8 again, because I want to talk about total library income, because this also depresses people where they've filled out the annual report and they're answering questions and this bottom line does not match your bottom line. And I get that, right? It's some often apples and oranges, and it's really tricky to get all the numbers to match up the same way. So just give me as best you can, answer the questions as best you can so that the income comes out as best we can. There's so many factors in terms of what the municipality pays for, what your library pays for, how all of that gets figured in here, but just do your best. And again, leave yourself some notes for next year. But this is really where we want to try to be consistent from year to year in terms of total income and all those bottom lines there. All right, scrolling back down to expenditures. I do get the question about where do I put my circuit fees or my swap fees. That goes into 9.6, all other materials expenditure. That goes right in there. So if you participate in one of those circuits or swaps, that's where it is. I also get questions about where do I put constant contact and visionware and my website design. That goes into question 9.10. So computer stuff, software, systems, telecommunications, lump it all in there. That all goes in there. Okay, scrolling down, we're going to make it by 3 o'clock. This yellow box right here at the bottom, total number of questions still unanswered. That number needs to be 0 when you send me your report. If that number is higher than 0, I'm going to send your report back to you and say you have not answered all the questions. You'll be able to find them based on this column right here where it says answer needed. So you can quickly scroll back through and eyeball where those questions are that you need to respond to. But I cannot accept your report until it is complete. Likewise, question 10.5 here, this is the thing that makes it official. This is the certification, right? So when you say yes here, and you must say yes in order for me to accept your report, you are saying yes, that you certify your director has seen it and your director is confirming that the information is accurate and complete. So when you say yes, please mean yes, that your director has seen it and confirms that it is all complete. That is super important. All right, and as I scroll down a little farther, there's a comment box here. So I often get comments in here. Sometimes there's oddities or weirdnesses. People will just draw my attention to it in the comments. Or if you have trouble with formulas and they're not coming up correctly, please go ahead and put them in the comments. But this is a great way to just note something that might be a little wonky, either with your stats or with the form. Or you can drop me an email. That's what we got. All right, I do want to leave you with this final bit of advice. Please start now. Please don't wait until the last minute. And I really encourage you not to wait till the last minute because stuff happens, right? Because we have a pandemic and all of a sudden your library is closed and you don't have access to information, or you're super preoccupied with something else. So if you can get to this sooner rather than later, I think it's going to be better for you guys. The deadline is the deadline, and there is no flexibility on that deadline. So if there's another pandemic, that deadline's probably still going to stand, right? I hate to tell you that. But please start now, because many of these numbers you can be gathering along the way already, right? Like a lot of this data you should and could have already. So please go ahead and fill it in. Please use the notes column as much as you can. Again, to help yourself, be kind to your future self, recreate it next year. Look for consistency from year to year and accuracy from year to year. I have heard from people who have been amazingly consistent from year to year, but they weren't necessarily accurate in terms of meeting the definition. I heard from a library director who said, "Oh my heavens, I have no idea what that person was doing when she was sending me her stats, but now that she's gone and we've checked on things, I don't know how she came up with those numbers. Those are way out of whack." So accuracy also matters. Please be accurate. Get them by the month. If you can distribute the workload, please do that, right? Like if you've got extra people in your library other than you, go ahead and use them, right? Because your circ department can send you numbers, your children's people can send you numbers, your adult services, everybody can be sending you numbers to put into this report, so that there's not just one person doing it. Please, please, please read the definitions, read the pop-up boxes. There's a question right now sitting in my email box that I read earlier that is answered in the instructions in the form. Please read the instructions, right? Please read the pop-up boxes. I really do try to anticipate your questions and put them in the form and answer them in the form. So please read the form. And then remember that the final data is only as good as what I get, right? So if for some reason I get wonky data, that's what I'm going to have to feed back to people. So please give me good data, solid, right? Consistent, accurate, solid data. All right. And I'm going to try to drop this evaluation link into the chat. Please go ahead and fill out the evaluation form for me, either now or in an hour when you get an email from me. I do appreciate your feedback. If you have further questions, if you have things that I did not answer or did not talk about, please let me know. Those are always useful. I think I answered all of the questions in the chat. You guys were, all right. All right, I must have answered everything. Okay, so thank you all very much for being here. I appreciate your time. I'm gonna go ahead and stop our recording, and I will see you again.